Hello YouTube. So a while back one of my favorite fellow Elder Scrolls YouTubers, A Bard's Ballad, made this really cool video on Oblivion's missing city, the city of Sutch, which during Oblivion's development was planned to be a 10th major city in Cyrodiil, but was completely removed from the game and replaced by a small fort, Fort Sutch, likely due to time constraints during the game's development. All of the in-game lore references to Sutch as a city were now all from a long past, suggesting that Sutch as a city fell somewhere long before the events of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, leading it to becoming nothing more than a ruin, which basically looks like a fort. Now, I added A Bard's Ballad's amazing video to this description, so be sure to watch that video after this one. However, when at the Elder Scrolls Online 10 Years event I got the chance to play the early demo for the new Elder Scrolls Online chapter Gold Road, which takes place in the western parts of Cyrodiil, the first thing that I did when I got to play the demo was run to where Fort Sutch is supposed to be in Oblivion, to see if in the second era Sutch as a city did indeed exist. And I'm happy to report, yes, Bethesda did add Sutch as a settlement in the newest chapter. So once more, the first thing I did when starting to play the chapter when it came out was head out there to document all the new lore for that place for you guys. So, let's roll the intro and see what I uncovered about Sutch. So, Sutch. As you can see in A Bard's Ballad's video, it was once supposed to be a 10th major city of Cyrodiil, complete with its own castle and its own administrative county of Cyrodiil, as it can be seen in old Oblivion demos. Sutch was supposed to be this trading city on the border between Hammerfell and Cyrodiil, where Redguards and Imperials lived together and traded with one another, attracting all sorts of artists and specialty craftsmen, and it bordered a moderately sized lake, which was removed from Oblivion entirely in the final build. So, for me, expectations were quite high, and what they gave us was kind of what I expected. While Sutch in its second era version is definitely not a major city of Cyrodiil, it's far from a small village and about the size that you'd expect a trading hub on the border to be. It has some really nice streets and alleyways and a really nice tavern, which really gives off the vibe as a place where traders and caravans would meet. And it even has its own bank with pretty large vaults called the Sutch Depository, again suggesting that it's a pretty wealthy trading hub. Now, in addition, it has one of the coolest alchemy shops that I've ever seen in the entire Elder Scrolls series, showing again how in good times this city is quite a bustling trading hub. And in addition to it being a trading hub, the town has quite sizable mines in which a large part of the population seems to make its living wage. They also have some tanners living in the town, and its population, as the earlier lore suggests, does seem to be made up primarily of Redguards and Imperials living together. Now, in terms of the lake close to the city, which was planned to be there in the scrapped Oblivion content, well, that lake is nowhere to be found, and neither is a city wall or a castle for a local lord. But the city is quite close to the fort of Varen's Watch, which is a fortress which, according to the lore on its loading screen, gets renamed every time there is a new ruler, who usually then call it after themselves, or the local people rename it to that ruler's name to please the new ruler. So I can very much see this fortress after the Alliance War becoming Fort Sutch, as the fort likely has intensive ties to the town. This fort could even one day become the castle of the local lord, because we know that later on, or maybe earlier in the past, Sutch was or would become its own county in Cyrodiil, likely with a castle, at least in scrapped content. So I think it's quite likely that after the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, this fort would become Castle Sutch, and perhaps eventually after the abandonment of the town, this fort would become the ruins of Fort Sutch, which we can find in Oblivion. Or perhaps this Fort of Varen's Watch actually was Castle Sutch, from which the local ruler ruled the city and perhaps his own county, only until the city of Sutch started to decline eventually, because as you likely saw on screen in the footage, when we get to visit the city in the Elder Scrolls Online, it's definitely been in better shape, as when we visit the town it's overrun by vampires, and the quests in the area have you as the player save Sutch from this vampire menace. Now, this quest reveals that a few years before our playtime there was a faction of bandits who were based in Sutch's underworld and raided the local caravans which trekked through the rich trading town. One of these bandits, their leader named Balandris, somehow contracted vampirism, and instead of being bummed out about that, he figured that vampirism was somewhat of a blessing for him, as it would allow him to live far longer than most other mortals, as vampires are immortal as long as they aren't killed and keep drinking blood in regular intervals. During the questline we discover that with their consent he basically infected all of his other fellow bandits who also wanted their own slice of immortality, and that they used some of the gold that they robbed off the traders and caravans trekking through Sutch to pay for people to donate their blood to them, so that they didn't have to kill people specifically for their blood, meaning that as vampires they were at least somewhat decent. Keyword here being were, because at some point their efforts of robbery and banditry made it so that less trade came through Sutch, as out of fear of being robbed, some caravans and traders simply started avoiding the city. This also meant that their profits dried up, meaning that they no longer had the gold to sustain their bloodlust in a civil manner, meaning that their leader, Balandrus, eventually decided to actively start killing the people of the town to drink their victims' blood. Now, most of the members were fine with this, except for one, Mayrina, who left the gang and got her vampirism cured after long searching for a cure. Unfortunately, her leaving made it so that eventually Balandrus and his fellow bandits went completely off their rocker, as Balandrus started getting megalomaniac plans, wanting to create a vampire army to conquer large parts of Cyrodiil for himself, and the first thing that he decided to do was turn the inhabitants of the city of Sutch into obedient blood fiends for his army. Now, when the ex-gang member Mayrina heard rumors of this happening, she made her way back to Sutch, and she acts as your companion in trying to free the city from the vampires. Now, obviously, you being the main character, you manage to get rid of Balandrus and his people. However, when the city is free of vampirism, the few remaining inhabitants reveal that they aren't sure what is to become of Sutch, as it lost likely over 70% of its population to the vampires and now has a bad reputation among traders, meaning that restoration of the city will cost a lot of effort. While the game keeps the option open on whether or not Sutch will be restored, it is very possible that this, meaning the first decline of trade due to the vampire bandits, and then the loss of 70% of its population due to Balandrus' crazy schemes, is what led to Sutch's decline and eventual complete disappearance, as the remaining citizens would have left the town to settle elsewhere, and its buildings would slowly rot away until all that's left is this small fort in Oblivion. But that's just one possibility, because it's also a possibility that the city managed to restore itself somewhat before its eventual decline, which would lead to its disappearance at the end of the Third Era in Oblivion, which is nearly 800 years after the Elder Scrolls Online, so all sorts of things could have happened in the meantime, but I don't know. I just personally really appreciated that they added this city and gave it the backstory and lore that it was always supposed to have, and I personally think that's just really cool. And that is basically everything I can say on Sutch. Now, after Bethesda Netherlands was super nice to give me a code for the new chapter so I can make some lore videos on the lore that the new chapter brings, this was literally the first thing I ran to in the game, just like when I first played the demo, because I really wanted to know the story of Sutch and what they did with it. And I cannot say that I came away disappointed personally. Now, at some point in the next few weeks and months I'll likely cover some more of this chapter. I have to say it looks pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to finally having the story of the forgotten Daedric Prince, Italia, completed, so I can make a full video on her at some point in the future, as I've been holding off on making a video on her ever since her discovery a while back, as we didn't have enough information to really make a lore video on, but I knew that eventually they were probably gonna properly give us her story, so we do have a lot of more information now, so once I played all that, expect a video somewhere in the upcoming months on the Forgotten Daedric Prince. And don't worry, not all my videos in the coming weeks will be on the new chapter, as I have some other videos planned as well, such as a video that I'll upload quite soon on interracial relationships on Tamriel, for example, how a Nord and Argonian's relationship would be viewed by others, and how that works biologically, so look forward to that. That being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I hope you'll subscribe and return for the next lore video, probably next week or in a few days. Would really help me out. Now, all that remains for me to be done is to thank my top Patreon subscribers, Mr. Bernardo Binda, His Soul, Gabriel Binda, Athena Iodis, Doji, Fenrir, King Chris, Pavel T, Penta McGuire, Volkure of Argonia, Leo Worley, and Sword of Bushido. They and all the others on screen keep this channel alive, and for that I'm eternally grateful. That said, I will see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.